Where's the coffee?
The last time, well, was coffee with leaders and we have wine, so we haven't got the point yet. Well, but the objective of this Coffee with Leaders basically is to have the opportunity to share ideas with leaders from the world in different areas. And instead of organizing big conferences, it's to have the opportunity in a small gathering like this for you to have the opportunity to share your thoughts, your ideas, your doubts about issues related with what we have been facing right now. One of the main issues that Brian is a real expert. It's about changing process, changing cultures in organizations. He's the founder and leader of an organization by the name of Oxford Leadership Academy. And without any doubt, it's, if not the most important consulting company in Europe related with leadership, it's one of the first two at least. They only lead process with global companies and huge companies, no more than 10 customers at the same time, so that they can put a lot of control on the process. And since maybe 5 years ago, they started growing worldwide. Now they have operations in Mexico. Juan Carlos Murillo is the head of the group in Mexico, but they have operations in Brazil, in the US, in Germany, in Spain, and so on. And well, without any more introduction, you already saw his bio on the invitation. I don't want to take more time than this, and perhaps open up our discussions related with change. What we are facing right now is a change in everything. Change in life, change in concepts, change in educations, change in process. It's part of our life. So what I would like to ask Brian is, if everything is changing, why is it so difficult to change the culture? Especially when you talk about culture in your side, or your family, or in organizations. And from now on, we can start keep on our conversation moving, and later on you will be asked to share your thoughts with Brian. Brian, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Javier. Thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. And I hope to take advantage of a gathering like this, too, to learn from you. And I hope that you don't assume from Javier's very generous introduction that I've got a whole lot of answers on this subject, but I certainly know some of the good questions to ask about how to change a culture. I guess the first thing that I might say, or at least as an observation, that when it comes to institutions and also communities, and if I take the largest community that we're all a part of, which is our human civilization, as one, that's something that we share. If you don't change the culture, you don't really change anything. You just kind of move the chairs around on the deck, if you kind of think about Titanics and so forth. So let me start with that, about what is it that we're really talking about here. The major change ever occur through generational changes. And probably the biggest generational shift that we're seeing at the moment is a generation that's growing up with it just totally immersed in technologies which for my generation didn't even exist. The big companies that we work for, who are companies with brands that you would know, they're Telefonica and McDonald's and BASF and big corporations, most particularly for us at the moment it's HSBC. These are big institutions. Many of them are bigger than some countries. And they've been around a long time. They have different challenges, but most of the challenges are fundamentally the same. And ultimately, it comes down to culture. How do we actually change a culture? As I said, partly it's generational, but that's never going to be fast enough. For a company like HSBC, which has been in the news fairly prominently for issues particularly to do with Mexico, we started working with them 2 years ago when they became aware of this. You've seen it in the press because it just reached court. They knew about it and they were preparing for it 2 years ago when it first became apparent to the US Attorney General, I suppose, that HSBC was being used by the drug cartels to transport cash for money laundering. And it was a phenomena to them in London. Stuart Gulliver, the CEO, Krishna Patel, the head of private banking. How could this possibly happen to us? This is the most conservative, process-driven, risk-averse institution possibly that exists on the planet. How could this happen? The end of the conversation was fairly simple. It's our culture, and there's something within the culture. They prided themselves on their ability to avoid the things which would lead to this. It's an open secret that they talk about how they managed to avoid the ridiculous excesses of the fancy financial derivatives that led to the disintegration almost of the global financial system and certainly the financial crisis. Did they do that because they were the most ethical, the most moral, the most far-sighted, the most illuminated management with the best control systems? Absolutely not at all. The reason why they didn't get caught up with those things is that they are so slow, so bureaucratic, so completely bound up in their own procedures and adverse to change, that by the time they finally did jump on the bandwagon had toppled right off the cliff. In this case, their greatest weakness actually became their greatest strength in that particular case. And I'm talking stories not out of school. They will say these things and they've said it on investor conferences and so forth, so I'm not betraying or sharing with you any insider secrets here. But a culture like that can still permit a business such as their cash transaction business to experience growth like this, suddenly coming from nowhere without the right questions being asked. How does it happen? Ultimately, it comes back to the culture, doesn't it? Where you have people in an institution that are so driven by short-term concerns, so driven by financial results, that it becomes possible to even overlook the morality of something like this, even in an institution like that. Anyway, I guess you are aware that it's not easy to change a culture. Deeply engaged, deeply embedded behaviors that are driven by a mentality. And you can change the behaviors, you can write them down, you can identify the values that those behaviors connect to. And every institution on earth has done that now. Every institution on earth has got a vision which practically no one that works there can relate to. They've got a statement of values which are statements of pious intent that look very glamorous on glossy brochures, but in fact are nothing much more really than flying frisbees that you fling out at stakeholder meetings. When employees see them, this frisbee flies overhead Say, well, what was that? Well, that's our new value statement. And these things don't land, they don't get institutionalized. They become posters and brochures. They don't become the way in which you do things, because those statements actually contradict the way you do things. They contradict your culture. So let me just share with you and perhaps open a conversation about how do you enter into that conversation? What are the things that we've found that if you touch upon them are most likely to lead to the biggest difference? What I'm about to refer to, we've led conversations that have resulted in quite dramatic shifts in culture in companies like McDonald's and HSBC and the ASF and others. And let me pick up one part of it, part of a very, very big story. And that is, how do you deal with the dramatic changes which are occurring in the way that work actually occurs? Because we're now seeing a transition take place from my generation, the baby boomers, who are becoming fewer and fewer in number, but who still have in place the control systems, the structures and mechanisms by which the institutions actually work. But the majority now of people who are working there come from, well, your generation. Much younger people who have grown up with different technologies and have a completely different way of sensing and assessing and making choices and actually coming to work. And you're seeing a new kind of tsunami of books on the future of work and rhetoric around flexibility. And as a consequence, you're seeing many companies jump onto the bandwagon here and start introducing hyper-flexible work patterns in which people can work from home, they can choose the time that they work. We've even, in our office, have abandoned work hours. Why would we do that? Why would we tell people that we have empowered to produce certain results who are our employees? Why would we tell them you have to be in the office at 8:30 in the morning and you have to be gone by 5 o'clock? How ridiculous is that? They will decide how much time they need to take to get things done. What we're interested in is not their inputs, we're interested in their outputs. This is so common now, at least in Europe, that, I mean, of course you're naturally going to do this. We don't conduct performance reviews on an annualized basis. We don't conduct them every 6 months as we used to. They're now conducted pretty much continuously through our online systems, where we're constantly giving feedback because we're constantly being asked for feedback. So how do you think that meeting went? How did you think my speech went today? And they're getting feedback from all of the colleagues, 215 people from all around the world. They're giving feedback continuously, relentlessly. And they're refining themselves, they're refining their own behavior. This is normal. And I wouldn't take up a gathering like this in telling you, well, these are the things that you can do, because you can do all of those things and you still won't change the culture. So what will? Let me give you a clue as to one thing that's necessary to change. If you're going to change work practices, you're going to introduce more flexibility, you're going to genuinely live up to a promise of empowering people to make decisions. And by the way, you've got no choice in doing this. Because if you're going to be employing people your age and your age, they expect this. And they won't work any other way, because they can work in places where they have got the ability to work in this way. So you'll change the structure. You'll change hierarchies, you'll flatten. You'll change organizational systems in the way in which people are remunerated. You'll change office systems in the way in which people have got the flexibility to be able to work when they want. You will remunerate people based upon outputs and deliverables, not on inputs. such as time. But that won't be enough. What you have to change is the most difficult part of this whole thing. You have to change the mentality of the people who are in the institution, not just the managers. You actually have to change the mentality of people who for a long time have been employees. And the one thing which I have seen when an organization goes after this, it makes the biggest difference in changing a culture. And that is a mentality which is most simply defined as the adult-child mentality.